In episode 5 of the Amazing Digital Circus, Jax is angling to win over Pomni, and we learn why Jax sees his own behavior as perfectly reasonable. More on that later. The basic premise of episode 5 is that Kane, dismayed that the characters don't seem to enjoy his adventures, takes them through a lightning round of adventures from the suggestion box. Quantity over quality? Episode 5 also has some of the strongest links to the short story that inspired this whole show, Harlan Ellison's short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. All her talk of sweetness and light, all her memories of true love, all the lies she wanted us to believe. I was the only one still sane and whole. Really? That's a grim quote that I'll put in context towards the end of the video. First, let's go over the basic plot of episode 5, then we can unpack the more intriguing storytelling elements and how all this unveils what makes Jax tick. Episode 5 opens with Zubul reading on the sofa while the other circus members return from a wet adventure. Pomni collapses and Ragatha's failed attempt to cheer Pomni up backfires when Jax comments, "Looks like that oh so positive Ragatha charm is starting to wear off, huh?" Annoyed with Zubul's disinterest in his adventure, Kane opens up to feedback from the other characters, but he doesn't like their responses and decides to go through a lightning round of adventures in the suggestion box. It starts with Jax's hunting adventure, then a US presidential political crisis ending when Gangle explodes, followed by an anime adventure. Jax thinks the anime is a loser's idea, it's Gangle's, but he adds that it's not as embarrassing as the time Gangle took an anime figurine, which immediately causes Gangle to abort her adventure. This is a callback to Jax blackmailing Gangle in episode 2. The next adventure is chill stargazing, where the characters can finally relax. Jax takes this as an opportunity to suggest Gangle can never be happy. Ragatha suggests she'd be happier if Jax wasn't mean to her all the time. His response, "She likes when I'm mean to her though." Then he shares with Pomni his view on Ragatha, which I'll unpack later. Anyway, Kane is horrified that the characters may enjoy the suggestion box adventures more than his. He jerks them into a surreal hellscape, then drops them into the next adventure, a bar loosely based on one of Zubul's old jobs, where we learn Pomni used to be an accountant for a supermarket chain, Gangle dropped out of community college, Jax claims he had cancer, which Zubul says is a lie, and Ragatha used to be a well-off real estate agent with a mother who would berate and guilt trip her. Speaking of Jax and Ragatha, here comes a new development in their relationship. Jax apologizes to Pomni for the uncomfortable US president adventure, and the moment Pomni accepts the apology, Jax throws it in Ragatha's face, saying, "Wow, the first steps of a budding friendship, right Ragatha?" He follows up by gaslighting Ragatha, telling her she told Gangle to kill herself. I guess this is another example of his humor, but it's also an example of guilt tripping. Did he get inspired by hearing about Ragatha's difficult mother and immediately exploit a revealed weakness? Classic Jax. During Softball, the final adventure, it's clear how fully Jax burnt his bridges with Gangle and Zubul, since the pair can't contain their glee when they see his rage at his unexpected maid outfit. Ragatha takes on board Pomni's advice that it's okay to be a jerk sometimes, and chews out Jax for being a jerk to everyone, then storms off, which only seems to make Pomni feel more sympathy for Jax. Back at the circus, Pomni goes off with Jax while Ragatha watches in dismay. Pomni, at least for the moment, is warming to Jax. Perhaps he's no worse than Ragatha. Let's break down how Jax views Ragatha's behavior for a moment. I think she tries way too hard. Like, we're stuck in, why are you always pretending everything's always fine? Like, if you tell someone they're loved and appreciated every day, it just kind of loses all meaning. It just feels like she's trying to take advantage of you, you know? So from Jax's point of view, it seems he's no worse than Ragatha. However, in episode 4, Jax dunked Ragatha into a deep fat fryer and left her to suffer, only one of many of his relentless physical and verbal attacks against other characters. In episode 5, Jax complains that the problem with Ragatha is that she pretends things are fine and tells people they're appreciated. The thing is, constantly finding new ways to physically harass people is a bigger problem than telling people you appreciate them. But at least he apologized to Pomni for the stress of that US president adventure, right? Thing is, Jax's adventure caused Pomni to feel overwhelmed, but it caused Gangle to explode. So it's not like he had a sudden bout of remorse for the upset he caused. He's completely fine with the upset he caused Gangle, but Pomni's different. One thing episode 5 establishes pretty clearly is that other than the new girl, Pomni, The other characters are done with Jax's antics. His constant harassment has burnt most of them out. They are, in short, sick of his crap. As the new gal in the circus, Pomni has had less time to be worn out by Jax's constant entitled and unempathic behavior, and he knows it. Also, Pomni seems to be less outraged than, say, Zubul by the sight of Jax's bullying. Episode 2 established the hold Jax has over his favorite target, Gangle. He used blackmail over the figurine thing, and my recent video about Ragatha discussed how that mysterious incident seems to have created a wedge between Gangle and Ragatha. Regardless, in episode 4, Gangle's moment of authority defanged Jax's hold over her. Jax realizes his grip over Gangle is weaker than he thought, so he has set his sights on the circus's fresh meat. Blackmail is limited, so with Pomni he tries friendly overtures, and it's working. In episode 5, the characterization of Jax and Ragatha in particular ties strongly to a key influence on the Amazing Digital Circus, the short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. There's a quote I've referenced before in my video about Cain and Zubul, which shows how, in the short story, the machine AM warps the world of the characters. In a moment I'll explore how it connects to episode 5. Limp, the body of Gorrister hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber. When Gorrister joined our group and looked up at himself, it was already too late for us to realize that once again AM had duped us, had its fun. It had been a diversion on the part of the machine. 3 of us had vomited, turning away from each other in a reflex as ancient as the nausea that had produced it. From there, the short story gets darker. The character Ellen, more so than any other, tries to ease everyone's pain. Seeing Gorrister's horror at the sight of his own lifeless body, Ellen is the only one to show compassion. Ellen knelt down beside him and stroked his hair. Later, Ellen starts to cry when another character, Benny, desperately tries to escape the machine. Gorrister has a quick and simple response to Ellen's shock. Gorrister slapped her. She slumped down, staring up at poor loony Benny, and she cried. It was her big defense, crying. We had gotten used to it 75 years earlier. Gorrister kicked her in the side. This is interesting as an exploration of empathy and violence under stress. Ellen's concerns become a nuisance to at least some of the other characters, and we see the narrator begin to justify his contempt with elaborate rationalizations. Is she crying? It's not that she's upset, it's a defense. I think it's fair to say that getting slapped and kicked is upsetting, and it's unrealistic to insist on some alternative explanation for why, after being physically attacked, someone might cry. Harlan Ellison is famous for horrifying short stories, many of which are too dark and violent for the plot of a YouTube animation. So while the Amazing Digital Circus really can't go to the same gruesome extremes, it can explore the same basic themes of empathy, contempt, violence as a reaction to stress, and more. Jax uses violence against the other characters as a way to blow off steam, and we see him justifying this a lot in this episode. He's mean to Gangle, but she likes it. Being too nice like Ragatha is a form of exploitation equal to physically attacking people for your own entertainment. Certainly that's what Jax wants Pomni to believe. The reality is that Jax's suspicions about Ragatha are just his thoughts as far as we've seen, but if he's aiming to exploit Pomni, it makes sense he'd suspect Ragatha is trying the same thing. In the short story, the narrator despises Ellen, but then he despises everyone. All her talk of sweetness and light, all her memories of true love, all the lies she wanted us to believe. I was the only one still sane and whole. Really. Those scum, all 4 of them, they were lined and arrayed against me. We learnt in episode 3 that King had lost his wife to the circus, and that only seems to motivate him to be kind to the other characters when he can. For Jax, the horrors of the circus seem to motivate him to exploit and harass his fellow circus members to the fullest extent possible. The characters in the Amazing Digital Circus are more sympathetic than the characters in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, with the exception, in my opinion, of Jax. Jax captures the spirit of the original short story, of someone who has become entirely engulfed by boundless hate at the situation they're trapped in. I suspect that Pomni is just another tool Jax wants to use against the others in the circus, and I'm interested to see how these increasingly complex relationships unfold in future episodes. If you enjoyed my thoughts on episode 5 and the internet's favorite unempathic purple rabbit, subscribe for more overthinking and analysis of odd animations. Thank you to those of you who've subscribed already. Have a great week, embrace the weird, and thank you for watching.